What's the time?
Playtime!
S-M-I-R-E, every day! When you are down and out,
So recently I played through chapters 1 through 3 of Poppy Playtime because, you know, I got to see what all the fuss is about, and I've been hearing all this praise about chapter 3 specifically. And of course, you know me, I'm like, what, 4 weeks late to the party? It's whatever at this point, but I genuinely did not expect Poppy Playtime to be a good, horrific experience, but here we are. In all seriousness, I was very impressed. I think this game really brought it home, and I'm sure plenty of you watching, as well as I, are excited for chapter 4. I not only want to talk about my experience with each chapter, but how the horror changed or improved over time. I felt like with each chapter, the game got scarier, chapter 3 being a nearly vertical jump. I don't really like long intros, so let's talk about it. Without further ado, my name is Josh, also known as Gorf Guini, and I hope you enjoy. I think a major component as to why Chapter 3 was much more effective was one of the main villains, Catnap. Now, each chapter had a villain highlighted throughout the game that specializes in a certain type of horror or tension. Before we talk about Catnap, I think it's important to discuss our predecessors and what they did to scare us. In Chapter 1, we had the infamous Huggy Wuggy. Now, granted, the first game is about 30 minutes in length, so you didn't really get to see a lot of him here. But what I will say is that Huggy Wuggy did a good job in providing tension. Shortly after the game begins, you are greeted by a statue of Huggy Wuggy, one of Playtime's most infamous toys. He's positioned as such to greet the guests awaiting a tour of the factory as mentioned in the introductory VHS tape. Now, as stated in the horror game handbook, if there is a big statue in the middle of a room, most likely it's going to move. Which of course I was right about. And of course he's gone! Great! What I like about Chapter 1 is that it's short enough to keep that tension, but not too short where the reveal is premature. As I solved puzzles in the most convoluted way possible, because I'm a moron, there was an itch in the back of my mind that I was being watched. Moments where I would see him peek from behind something, I've never felt 100% safe. When he finally did appear, it wasn't really a shocker, not gonna lie. I mean, you look at that dark corridor and tell me that nothing's gonna jump out. That is a classic move in the horror game handbook. Regardless, Huggy Wuggy did his part, and he did his part well enough. Tension is a crucial aspect of any horror game, and having that tension throughout, not to mention the chase scene within the vents, was very good. Now, in Chapter 2, we had Mommy Longlegs. Mommy Longlegs does provide tension, don't get me wrong, but in a very different way. What I gathered from her character was hostile uncertainty. The game is structured around 3 mini-games, and with each game you complete, she'll give you a piece of the code for the train so you can escape. Although, when Mother Spindly Thighs starts to add random symbols to my color memory game... Okay. You know, I wondered if she would stay true to her word. With each game, Mother tries to sabotage it in some way. In musical memory, it's impossible levels of memorization. In Whack-A-Wuggy, the toys are free to leave the tubes, killing you if you fail. In statues, the exit is blocked off, forcing you to crash through this window to escape. You never know what she'll do next, or if she'll even follow along with her own rules. With each game, Mommy Longlegs becomes a bit more unhinged, eventually showing her true colors once you cheat in the final game. I never knew what exactly was going to happen, and that right there is why she created a good sense of horror for Chapter 2. Now, Catnap, on the other hand, is a completely different monster. He's a combination of both Mother and Huggy Wuggy, but is so much more than that. Firstly, I think we can all agree that Catnap's design is the creepiest. I don't know about you, but seeing that frozen, gaping grin, it doesn't exactly give me butterflies. But it's his introduction that really sparks something sinister.
The wind's really scary. I can't sleep.
Hey, we'll be okay, guys. I promise. All winds blow away. Eventually.
Please, help us go to sleep, Catnap!
We need it, Catnap!
Please help
We don't know much about Catnap, but what we do know is that he's a nightmare for children. Further evidence is found in the form of this VHS tape about her mother relaying what happened to her child with her Catnap toy.
There are no details. Well, like any night, all the children were getting sleep. It was peaceful, quiet. Catnap had the red smoke in the room. Then suddenly, there was this scream. Nightmares happen, I know, but this... dilated pupils and quivering lips. The way her eyes darted around the room, and I swear, her hand in mine, it felt like her blood was boiling beneath her skin. She saw something too. Something horrible. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. Miss Harper, we'll provide the very best care we can offer. You have my word. But this is important. Did Marie happen to describe what she saw? Yes, a monster, she said that it was colorless. Gosh, I could feel the poor little heart pounding. For her, it was right there. And her movements, they were so wild. Arms flailing, legs kicking.
In Chapter 3, most of the game takes place in Playcare, an underground orphanage that was, in actuality, a facade, meant to cover the grotesque experimentations on the orphans who reside there. Depending on their scores in the minigames within Chapter 2, Catnap would actually use his red gas to sedate his victims, and then bring them in for testing. We learn later on that Catnap was in a horrible accident, but another antagonist that we don't really know much of yet, named the Prototype, saved his life. Because of this, Catnap reveres the Prototype as a god, building giant altars, worshipping it, and of course, hunting heretics, sometimes feeding the lesser toys beneath them both. Huggy Wuggy was a silent monster who was solely meant to protect the factory after hours, but he was simply a mindless puppet meant to be controlled by a higher power. Mommy Longlegs was psychotic, she hated the employees and reveled in hurting them. There are even notes found in Chapter 2 stating her hostility towards the staff. She has character, and I like that, a voice to reflect her crazy nature. As mentioned before, unpredictability is certainly a scary attribute, but with Catnap, sometimes knowing the why behind someone's intentions and how they do it can be all the more frightening. We know that Catnap likes to play with his victims, only killing them when they're at their lowest point. While exploring Playcare, you will hear Catnap breathing behind doors, peering through corridors, or attacking you through the red fog. He's a constant threat throughout the game. His methods are intelligent and brutal. What I love about Catnap is he doesn't need to be overly animated or even have a voice like Mommy Longlegs. His calm demeanor is more than enough to evoke horror. Although I will say, I feel like I'm forgetting something about him. There was one scene that had a lot of people spooked. Yeah, that's the one. Being chased in horror games can be a violent rush of adrenaline that captures the primal instincts of anyone who plays it. Chase scenes over the course of horror history have been a staple in evoking terror to those who wish to experience it. Regardless, I would argue that the chase scenes in Poppy Playtime are a key ingredient for the game. There is quite a handful throughout each chapter, and while they are chiefly scripted, I think there's still potential here. In Chapter 1, the most tense moment in the game is when Huggy Wuggy chases you through the vents. It's been a while since the expert usage of sound design made me stand in the erected squatting position, because the sound of Huggy in the vents violently pursuing you is terrifying. I had no idea if I had some distance or if he was right behind me the entire time. At a certain point, your way is blocked off briefly, so I of course had to turn around. Oh! Ah! The music certainly helps too, making the urgency all the more prominent. Now, after the first death, I knew how this worked, okay? It's really not that hard. After that, I wasn't really scared anymore because I knew what route to take. I knew from a gameplay perspective, he wouldn't catch me if I kept going. So the horror lost its luster very quickly. I mean, that's how plenty of chase sequences go in this game, but that first experience is what I'm primarily looking at. And all in all, I give this chase scene a solid 8, at least when compared to the other chases that I'll discuss briefly. In Chapter 2, Mommy Longlegs doesn't have your usual connective chase scene. Instead, you play hide and seek, solving puzzles along the way. After each puzzle, Mommy will surprise you and then you have to find a hiding place before she catches you. This may not qualify as a chase scene per se, but it's my video, so I don't care. Afterwards, she does chase you in the traditional way, but it's more or less the same as Huggy Wuggy, except it's not inside tight vents. Personally, I think the claustrophobic nature of Huggy Wuggy's chase is more frightening. Don't get me wrong, hearing Mommy laugh throughout the chase sequence doesn't exactly, make me feel easy, and the music for her chase scene I think is better, but the tight one-way vents are just cruel in comparison. It doesn't help too that her hands block off dead ends, so you know exactly where to go. With Huggy Wuggy, it was straightforward, but there were a couple of dead ends that would rightfully have you restart. If it was just Mommy Thin Shins, I would say Chapter 2 was quite lacking in this category, but fortunately, there's one more that I think is done quite well. PJ Pugapillar, or I like to call him Catapug. Anyways, his chase is very different from most because his is based on red light, green light. PJ is a part of the third game, Statues, where you must reach the end before, PJ catches you. You can only move during lights off, but PJ on the other hand doesn't obey those rules. Again, the sound design is really nice because while the lights are on, the only noise you hear are his footsteps slowly approaching you. I like how this one gives you visual progress too. I can see how far I am from him, and while this one isn't all that scary, I'll admit, the structure of it is well designed, and I dare say, it's actually a lot of fun. Chapter 3, once again, makes what I just talked about seem like a kiss on the cheek. There's two in particular that I want to talk about, and each one is a masterful scene on its own. When you find Dog Day, one of the last smiling critters, he relays information about Catnap and the prototype. Shortly after, he's consumed by the little toys who then control his body. You are then promptly chased through the playhouse, through tight curves with more of the little toys blocking your path. Unless you're like me, who failed too many times, then they just don't show up afterwards. What I love about this chase scene are the little toys. Not only do you have to successfully navigate the playhouse, but you must blast through the toys in your way. Multiple times, paths will be shut, only for another to open up. At first, the chase scene is intense and unpredictable. You never know if a path will close on you or if a toy will block you. All the while, Dog Day is gargling up a storm a few meters behind you. However, by far, the best chase scene in the entire game belongs to Miss Delight. If you've never heard of Weeping Angels, the way they function is they will not move as long as you stare at them. The moment you look away, they begin to chase you. Miss Delight does not share the prominent con that all the other chase sequences have in Poppy Playtime, that being their scripted nature. Once she's active, her actions are essentially based on what the player does. If you don't see her, she'll begin to move, and based on her position, you have to think strategically on how to move around her. The best part is this isn't some straightforward chase, not at all. You're in the school building and must navigate through classrooms, hallways, locked gates, and must power on certain obstacles in order to move forward. Trying to solve puzzles while Miss Delight lurks behind a corner or is straight up in your face is a phenomenal way to create horror. I remember multiple times in the last section that I had to risk getting her close because I couldn't keep her in sight while reaching for the battery or whatever I was doing. Not only must you figure out the puzzles, but you have to keep an eye on her to avoid capture. It's such a brilliant combination that works so well. It creates a sense of uneasiness as she stares at you awaiting your next move. I had to get really good at paying attention to my surroundings and of course walking backwards. The chase scenes in Poppy Playtime sell the horror of the game from a gameplay perspective. Sure, the villains, as previously mentioned, are disturbing, but if you can't translate their character into gameplay, then what good is it? Each villain has their own personality that is reflected in the way they chase you. Ironically, Catnap doesn't need to chase you, but is a recurring threat throughout the game as you get glimpses of him stalking you. He only reveals himself fully near the end, where you fend him off in a sort of, boss fight. It was good, I liked it, but I don't know if it qualifies as, I guess it's a boss fight. Regardless, I thought the chase scenes in Poppy Playtime were good, and if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be Huggy Wuggy. It's a classic that was done really well. Lastly, I'm going to talk about atmosphere, because this is one of the most important aspects to a horror game. This one's kind of hard to compare because each chapter does take place in the same setting, Playtime Co., but they do focus on specific areas. Chapter 1 is in the entrance, Chapter 2 is in the game station, and Chapter 3 in Playcare. While each chapter has a great atmosphere, Chapter 3 is the pinnacle and what I really want to talk about here. It's really the lore that ties the setting's eerie nature together. Playcare is Playtime Co.'s on-site orphanage located underground. What I find to be important for the atmosphere is the why behind it all. Does the setting make sense in the world of this game? And in Poppy Playtime, yes it does. The smiling critters introduced in the first VHS are the mascots of Playcare and used to reside in this place when it was active. As I mentioned before, this place was really meant to house experimentation on the children, making it all the more disturbing, but they still had to make a believable orphanage. Throughout this chapter, you'll explore the school, orphanage known as Home Sweet Home, Playhouse, and more. You can find biographies of the smiling critters surrounding the central building, and even cardboard cutouts with voice lines, although they do get quite disturbing the more you play with it.
I know you are. Give it here! Now that's much better.
Each building is structured differently, making each one feel like its own separate setting. The sound design in each building is different, the color palettes contrast, and the level design is always unique. Personally, I love abandoned or apocalyptic settings, and Playcare is exactly that. It's been roughly 10 years since anyone has set foot in this place, allowing for Catnap to make his home here. Before Dog Day is eaten alive, he gives us some insight on what was happening since the company's fall.
Nothing left to save. Not here. Nor at Catnap's home, Angel. Their home. A myriad pairs of eyes are on you now. Watching, waiting, hungry. They want nothing more than to crawl beneath your skin and eat away at you bit by little bit. Fill what feels empty inside themselves. That thing. Catnap. The prototype is his god, and this is what he does to heretics. These little toys follow Catnap to avoid that very fate, and in return, they are fed. We try to fight it, the prototype's control. I am the last of the smiling critters. Listen to me. You need to get out of this place. You need to live.
Something I want to point out is that there's this hierarchy in place. There's the little toys, Catnap, and then the prototype. Notice the candles before you encounter Dog Day. This is a religious practice for Catnap. We even witness him worshipping what looks to be an unholy amalgamation of toys, an altar he created. Religious imagery, as I've mentioned before, is my favorite type of imagery because the creativity, the practices, the cults I've seen in gaming are always intriguing. I am always impressed by how twisted religion can be, and in Poppy Playtime, it's quite demented. Beyond this one cat cult, there are moments where you hallucinate. These hallucinations are some of the best moments in the game. One in particular that comes to mind is what I'll call the PT Silent Hill one. If you've played the demo, then you know what I'm talking about. You enter an endless loop of corridors, the radio and silence taunting you as you venture deeper within. The radio mentions the dead body of a young boy found on the estate of the late Elliot Ludwig, the founder of Playtime Co. As the radio recalls the story, it becomes twisted, demented, and distorted. You see images of Catnap in the distance, you hear his breathing behind the doors. Finally, you enter a room with a TV. This is perhaps my favorite moment in the game, and I won't talk over it, just watch.
May you descend into the dark and the dust, finding all that awaits you are incomprehensible horrors, each hungry for your return, each eager that they might find you. Perhaps they'd smile at you from a shadow, their smiling mouths full of teeth and meat and plastic, watching and waiting patiently for their turn at a warm welcome. Or perhaps they won't allow you such time to figure your place in the world you'd left, a world that's theirs now. Welcome home.
It's moments like this that make Chapter 3 horrifying. Building that tension, connecting the lore to the atmosphere is brilliant. These hallucinations mess with your mind, wondering what's real and what isn't. I would give the atmosphere in Chapter 3 a solid 9 if it wasn't for one issue. Isolation is a key component when building a horrific setting because without help, there's hopelessness, vulnerability. In Chapter 1, you hear from nothing, nobody except from the VHS tapes. That's great, love it. In Chapter 2, Poppy is a brief, helpful partner that gets captured by Mommy, but for most of the game, you're on your own. However, Chapter 3 introduces a new character named Ollie who phones you more frequently than I would like. Not to mention, Kissy, Missy, and Poppy show up a couple of times as well who blabber on about the lore and stuff. I mean, I guess. This takes me out of it sometimes, if I'm being honest. Hearing someone through the phone guiding you in-game is not only boring, but it's not nearly as scary. All in all, the atmosphere is still phenomenal. I still give it like a solid 8. It's just those small hiccups in between. Not only did Poppy Playtime improve upon its horror, but it introduced new genres of horror within Chapter 3. I'm hoping that Chapter 4 will bring this all together, but really who knows. All in all, I thought this game was decently scary, nothing I haven't seen before, but you know what, it's pretty good. I give it a solid 8 catnaps, alright? It's pretty nice. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your support. I'm doing well, if you're wondering. For those of you who don't know, I'm in college, so that's why there's 2 weeks in between my upload schedule. I try to upload every week, but with socializing, with my work, my college work, it's really hard to do that. But what I will say is that Shadow the Erdtree is going to be released in the summer, and you bet your butthole that I'm going to be playing the crap out of that. And a lot of videos will be coming from that too, so hey. There's that. Let me know your thoughts on the game, and of course, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like and to subscribe for more content like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone, and of course, stay safe.